And FYI, we are hot mic. Okay. We're going to be that far apart? Okay.
Good. The city's asked us to hold off for just a couple more minutes, for probably about 5 more minutes actually. They're trying to set up the feed right now over in the Sutter room, and that will provide a nice overflow for us. So we're going to give them a few more minutes to set that up.
First thing I did was walk in the room with it, turn mine on the vibrate. Just think that you could do it. Those things like this are pretty comfortable. So we're going to start calling people and see if their phones are on.
Last week it was really good. Yeah. Yeah, it turned out really good last week. We'll see. Hopefully nothing crazy this week. No, I hope I was Wi-Fi. Ask her for a question.
Mom?
They did it. Bring it right back.
All right. Well, who goes first? I notice as I'm looking out here, we've got a couple of empty seats that have been empty for about 10 minutes or so. We do have a very full house tonight, so if there's any seats that we're holding that people may not show up or whatever, please, let us have a chance to fill those if we can. So, okay.
Over here.
Had a hard time eating.
Yeah, I really wish. I think this chambers is pretty nice.
Yeah. Oh, when they built it?
Well, that's true. When they built it, there was only 7 people in there, right?
So I just got word the Sutter room, we're waiting on an IT person to come back to try and get us live. And so it's going to be a few minutes, so we're going to ask the folks over in the Sutter room to go ahead and come on back. And we're going to go ahead and get started, and then we'll go from there. So anyway, we like to start these on time, and so we're going to do that. So anyway, my name is, welcome. My name is Dale Eiler. I'm a member of the Governmental Affairs Committee for the Chamber of Commerce. And actually, this is an election forum brought to you by the Chamber of Commerce and the Appeal Democrat. And this is, we've been doing these, Bob, what, about 20 years now, or 30?
Yeah.
Anyway, so a long time. We haven't missed any. So anyway, we have, tonight we have the Sutter County District Attorney's race and also the Sutter County Sheriff's candidates. And they'll be going maybe just a little bit later at this point, the Sheriff's office, or the Sheriff's candidates. Obviously by this time our candidates have been running a hard race. Their campaigns are difficult, and they're entering the home stretch. And one of the things that, we understand that supporters are passionate, and many of the supporters are here in the audience. many of us here in the audience, or many folks in the audience, haven't quite made up their minds yet which person they're voting for, and that's why they're here. For that reason, we're asking that the candidates and our audience remain professional and courteous at all times. We've had instances where individuals have had to be asked to leave, so we'd like not to have to do that this evening, obviously. In terms of forums, this is our last forum that we're putting on for this election cycle. We'll have another group of these for the November election. Our moderators tonight are Steve Miller with the Appeal Democrat. He's the editor for the Appeal Democrat, and Bob Harlan, who's the executive director for the Yuba Sutter United Way, and also the former owner of KUBA 1600. Tonight, anyway, there's the election forum committee that put this together. Consists of myself and Daria Ali, Bill Lloyd, Amy Carter, and we have Margaret Fernandez in the back at the back desk, and Jackie Lee's been participating with us at all of our meetings. Those that helped us put this together. One who's worked on putting these together, obviously, making all the phone calls and everything. Bob and Steve have put a lot of hours into putting together the questions, prioritizing the questions, and we definitely want to thank them for their time with that. This is an opportunity, there is an opportunity to ask questions. As I said earlier, unfortunately we already have more questions than time would allow, so we're going to sift through those and get to the most pertinent. And the cards, if you are still thinking about asking more questions, the cards need to be to both candidates. We do not ask questions of one candidate or another. So they need to be questions that work for both of them. And cards, anyway, at this point, we're going to go ahead and turn.
So this is 15.
Okay, at this point, we're going to go ahead and turn the session over to our moderators. Steve, Bob, we'll let you have it.
Dale, thank you very much.
All right.
Well, good evening, and it's good to be here for our final of 2 evenings of Sutter County races. A couple of things that Dale didn't mention. As we mentioned earlier, the forums this evening are being broadcast live on the Appeal Democrat Facebook page and will remain on the Facebook page under Videos tab until the elections. It's also being broadcast live on It's Yuba City and More on their Facebook page this evening and will be posted through Election Day. Also, stories will appear in the Appeal Democrat over the next few days. Probably the next one day after tomorrow would be the first one for the races tonight. We already have about 30 questions and time for about 11, so please do not be offended if we don't ask your question. We have received questions from the audience, the forum committee, and from readers of the Appeal Democrat. Also, candidates, we have a timekeeper. Jackie's our timekeeper, and she has 3 different flags to hold up. The first one says 30 seconds, the second one says 15 seconds, and the next one says time's up. And we would sure love for you to adhere closely to these time limits. And when you can come in under the time limit, that's even better. We might be able to squeeze in another question that way. And each candidate will have up to 1 minute to answer each of the questions. And the first person to answer a question will be rotated with each question asked. And the person answering the question first will have a 30-second opportunity to rebut or add to their answer. And each candidate will have up to 90 seconds for an opening statement and 2 minutes for a closing statement. And there's no rebuttals for the opening or closing statements. And as Dale mentioned, please let's hold our applause to the end of the forum this evening. With that said, we'll ask Amanda Hopper, the incumbent, to have the first opening statement.
Thank you. The last 4 years have been full of challenges and successes both, and ultimately it's been a term that I'm very proud of that's resulted in an office that I'm honored to represent here tonight. It's an office that's united. We're a team, and I'm humbled by their overwhelming support. And we as an office have done amazing things in Sutter County. And in just a few minutes I want to highlight some of those. There's been incredible growth and rebuilding in our victim witness program. When I started as the district attorney, we had 1.5 employees. We now have 5 full-time advocates, a program manager who is a licensed therapist and offers in-house therapeutic services for the first time in our history, as well as a full-time office assistant. Some of the growth within the victim witness office has resulted in great programs that give back to the community and improve advocacy as well as communication and outreach for victims of crime. We have established a bi-county gang prosecution team with Yuba County that has grown to become a tri-county gang prosecution team. We have provided active shooter training in schools, banks, county offices, and many other businesses here in Sutter County. We have created the officer-involved shooting team that's for both counties, and updated policies and procedures, as well as many other increases. Ultimately, Sutter County has a district attorney's office who prosecutes criminals with dedication and with integrity, who's committed to serving justice. That's what we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Chris Carlos, your opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my opinion, and I firmly believe this, that we need a change at the district attorney's office. We need a new direction. We need somebody with experience. We need somebody with leadership to change the direction in a positive way. I grew up in Marysville. I moved back to Sutter County, Yuba City in 1999 when I graduated from law school. I've worked at the Butte County DA's office. I've worked at the Sutter County DA's office. And now I'm a partner in a very successful law firm here in Yuba City. I have 40 jury trials. I have prosecuted numerous people for murders. And when I was here, a prosecutor in Sutter County, I was a founding member of the Sutter County Gang Task Force. In our first year, we sentenced gang members to over 300 years in prison. So it can be done. Now, if I am elected, I promise to stop the scandals, and I promise to try and keep the direction of the DA's office focused. I believe firmly that we need somebody making the hard decisions, that has done the hard trials, that has been there in court, has argued to the jury that these are criminals, that these are hard cases, and they're hard decisions to make, and they really need to be backed up with the experience. I have that experience, I have that dedication, and I promise to bring a new direction to Sutter County DA's office if I'm elected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. And our first question will be of Chris Carlos from Steve Miller. Steve?
Thanks. We created an informal survey that people could go to online and got several comments. We received some vehement and vitriolic statements more than questions on the survey, directed both ways, and some accusations both ways. Could you please comment on the tenor and temperament of this campaign to date?
It really is unfortunate, and I'm really going to try and keep it as positive as I possibly can tonight. I really believe that we can talk about the issues. I really believe that we can talk about our own personal experience as a prosecutor, as a criminal defense attorney, as a lawyer, and I would love to move forward in a positive direction and just address the issues.
I think those are absolutely accurate statements. I've never seen such a disappointing display of community behavior as I've seen in this election. Absolutely, I agree with what was just said, and I think that, like I said, my office, we go to work every single day. We hold our heads high. We do work, and we do it honorably. We do it despite the lies and the public attacks. We keep it positive, and we're going to keep right on doing that.
Chris, any follow-up?
Just that I really would like to, at least for the next 35 days, focus our own personal experiences, our own personal prosecutions, our own personal trials, and how we can change the direction of the DA's office, because I think that's what's most important.
Amanda, as DA, do you think it's important for you personally to actively take part in law enforcement actions such as raids, interviews, buys, stakeouts? And secondly, would you as DA think the originating law enforcement agency should complete all investigations, or should the DA investigators finish all investigations?
I'm going to answer that in reverse order, actually. The second part, the originating agencies should be the one to make their investigation as complete as they possibly can. It needs to get through preliminary hearing and have to pass a probable cause finding, and then the DA investigators are there to support the attorneys who prosecute the cases at trial, but they're not there to take over for the originating agency. Having said that, our law enforcement agencies across the board, just like many other agencies, have staffing issues, and every time they ask for assistance, we provide it. The first portion of the question is the law enforcement agencies should run their investigations. It is not at all uncommon for them to ask for support from the district attorneys who prosecute the cases, specifically things like helping with search warrants and anything else that might be anticipated early on in the stage of the investigation, but it should be the law enforcement agency that oversees, orchestrates, and makes the decisions for those investigations.
Chris?
I agree to a certain extent. When a case comes to the DA's office, it should be properly investigated before it ever gets filed and goes to court. One of the things I'd like to change at the DA's office is to convert the system to what's called a vertical prosecution system, where the same DA has the case from the very start to the very finish. That's the absolute best way to prosecute people. Then when it gets filed, by the deputy DA that makes that decision, that person is going to know that they're going to have that case all the way until the end. So they're not going to file bad cases. They're not going to file cases that they need further follow-up to burden the DA investigators. I mean, some is okay, but when a case gets filed, it needs to be thoroughly investigated. It needs to be ready to go to court. And I think with a vertical prosecution system, a lot more of that will happen. And I think that is absolutely the best way to prosecute cases. It makes the people that prosecute the cases have a vested interest to make sure it goes forward.
Amanda, any follow-up?
Yes, vertical prosecution is a nice idea and works well in large offices, but in an office the size of Sutter County, where you have 11 attorneys and anywhere from 50 to 70 cases every day in every court calendar that we appear at, it would be a practical impossibility. Our attorneys would be in court 100% of their time. They wouldn't have time to file cases, to prepare cases, to respond to motions, to meet with witnesses, to prepare their trials. It's simply impossible.
Steve?
Some of us see plea deals as a negative, that someone would be convicted of a lesser crime in return for a guilty or no contest plea just doesn't seem right. What's your philosophy on using plea deals? When is it right? When is it wrong? That goes to Chris.
Well, obviously, the vast majority of cases resolve in some fashion or another without going to a jury trial. That's why I think a person, and I did totally disagree respectfully with Amanda or my opponent on vertical prosecution. I worked in Butte County for over 7 years. It's an office that vertically prosecutes cases. It is possible. The Sutter County DA's office has the resources to do it. It is absolutely possible. But people should be pleading guilty to what the conduct that they have committed. So somebody shouldn't plead guilty to something that, is just making an offer to get the case forward, to get it moved on. That's why I think vertically prosecuting people makes the prosecutor with a vested interest and knowing the case and knowing what the person should plead to is a lot better than the system that's in place now. Time's up.
Using Butte County as an example, in that district attorney's office, the actual elected district attorney oversees all of the negotiations. The deputies are not given discretion to plea bargain their cases. And we found that also that doesn't work. One of the things that I appreciate the most about my office is I have great people. And when I make assignments, when I give them cases to handle, I have confidence that they're going to do so. And that includes gaining the discretion and the ability to gauge each case, its merits, and make the most just and ethical and equitable plea bargain that they can. That's why we plea bargain cases.
Well, I disagree, having worked for Mike Ramsey for a long time, that he makes every offer on every case. That's not true. But it is possible. It absolutely is possible. And again, if the person that starts the case is the person that finishes the case, instead of having 4 or 5 different people having one case, one person file it, one case, one person go to court, one person do the prelim, one person possibly doing the jury trial. It's not a good system, and nobody along that path really knows what they're doing as far as the case goes.
Okay, the next question is for Amanda. Please provide 2 concrete examples of your leadership style and how you were successfully able to use it to lead your way through a difficult problem or challenge.
Okay. 4 years ago, I promised to come into the district attorney's office and change the culture of the district attorney's office. I kept that promise. And one of the most difficult things that I've had to do is deal with personnel issues. And just like in any career field, there's bad apples. And sometimes those people have been allowed to stay there for a really long time. And it takes making the very hard decisions to change the way that the office works, to hold people accountable. And that's something that I've consistently done despite the difficulty that that's brought about. The second thing that I think I'm really proud of that has worked really well is I meet regularly a couple times, or at least once a year, with every single member of the district attorney's office. It's a closed door meeting where they're given the opportunity to give complete and honest feedback, raise questions, comments, concerns, give suggestions, and then we meet together as an entire office and debrief that and come up with common goals and visions for the office and ways of achieving those goals.
Chris?
I guess one of the biggest decisions I've made was leaving the prosecution world and going into private practice, having to be on your own and making decisions and moving forward without a steady paycheck, but it's worked out great. And I really actually enjoy it, and I wouldn't be sitting here unless I truly believe that the DA's office has a bad direction that they're in and needs to move forward in a different way. But as far as something that I guess when I was doing the gang task force prosecutions, we had some cases where it was important that everybody had to go to court and travel with armed security, and because there was security concerns. So the end result of that case, I think, was about 150 years in prison for the 3 defendants, and I'm very proud of that case.
Okay, Amanda, any follow-up?
No.
Okay.
An issue has been made of the number of cases filed versus the size of the budget as a measure of efficiency. Is that a valid measurement? What should we expect to see under your leadership for the next 4 years? Are there additional ways, based on statistics, to judge the performance of the office?
That's for me, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's very important to recognize the fact that the Sutter County DA's office budget is about $1.7 million a year more than the Yuba County DA's office budget. Having been a criminal defense attorney in this area for about the past 7 years, I can say, in my opinion, the Yuba County DA's office does a better job prosecuting people. I happen to see the chief prosecutor here tonight, but it's my opinion they do a better job, and it's because people are career prosecutors there. They know what they're doing. They have the experience. They've made the decisions. They've gone to trial, and they've done it before. And in my opinion, they're much, much more thorough. And Yuba County on half the budget. So I fail to see how it's impossible to change to a vertical prosecution system when, even though they have essentially the same number of cases, they have more people, they have more investigators, they have way more money. It should be possible.
Thanks. Amanda?
I'm going to respectfully disagree that the Yuba County District Attorney's Office does a better job. And just as a side note, yes, the Yuba County Chief Deputy is here, as are multiple members of my office, and anyone who wants to address that with them, I would encourage them to do so. Having said that, the budget for the Sutter County District Attorney's Office is 87.5% attributed to salaries and benefits. Salaries and benefits are set by the county salary schedule, and we have no discretion of that. So that's a huge amount of our budget that goes towards paying for people. The Yuba County District Attorney's Office has 14 employees. We have 30. We also have a victim witness department. They don't. They provide no advocacy. Their victim witness department is out of the probation department. They have 2 investigators. We have 6. A great illustration of the importance of having those investigators is that last month in Yuba County there was a shooting. There was an unknown amount of people who had been murdered and an unknown amount of people who were still there shooting. Every law enforcement agency in the community responded, including my DA investigators. The only ones who did not respond were the Yuba County DA investigators, and that's because the one car that they shared was in the shop. So they sat and listened on their radios. We provide a service to this community, and we do so ethically and under budget, by the way.
Chris, follow up.
One thing, I firmly believe that having the victim witness program within the DA's office is a strong conflict of interest. They become part of the prosecution team, so anytime the victim witness advocates are talking to the victims in the cases, that becomes something that the prosecutor now becomes ethically obligated to divulge to the defense, and I don't see how that's necessarily possible considering they have 5 victim witness advocates in the office talking to victims all the time.
Okay, Amanda, sting operations such as the child sex sting almost 2 years ago and the recently publicized prostitution John sting make good stories, but are they actually doing the county a lot of good?
In my opinion, they absolutely are for many reasons. First of all, they've been successful operations that have resulted in convictions. More importantly, really quickly, have most of you guys heard about those sting operations? Okay, just those that are watching at home, heads are nodding. That's called a deterrent factor. When we send a message that we will not tolerate this type of behavior, and when it is spread and publicized and people see that we care about protecting the residents of this community, that deters future criminality. Absolutely, these are good things. Not only are they good, they will continue because we have the staffing, the dedication, and the ability to serve our community with proactive investigations. Yuba County doesn't, and the Sutter County District Attorney's Office never did historically. This is something that we will continue and that we created.
Chris?
So I guess the question is, are the DA investigators in Sutter County, are they law enforcement officers that should be on patrol? Are they detectives? Or are they DA investigators that should be investigating cases at the DA's office? I mean, maybe that's the one thing that really needs to be decided in this whole thing. If they are going to be a police force, then that's a whole different story than doing prosecution support for the prosecutors in the office. And I would think that if you have 7 DA investigators versus Yuba County's 2, and you have the exact same number of cases, I mean, is it necessary to really have those 7 individuals, or should the funding go to the Sheriff's Department where there's 2 or 3 people on patrol in the entire Sutter County area at any one time? And I've heard of people calling the Sheriff's Department telling dispatch that I'm watching the guy stealing my equipment right now, and the dispatcher says, well, you're 6th on the list.
Any follow-up, Amanda?
I guess the question really is serving our community and promoting public safety necessary? I think it is. The DA investigators do an invaluable job. Things like investigating their cases, proactively investigating and making cases better, providing active shooter training to our schools, to our teachers, to our community, investigating officer-involved shooting to a better and more transparent and complete way than ever before. The DA investigators serve this community. Yes, I think that's necessary.
Starting with Chris, what's your position on the statewide legalization of recreational as well as medicinal marijuana and Sutter County stances? How should the DA's office prioritize marijuana issues?
I was a little confused by the Sutter County stances, but it is the law in California. The biggest concern I have when it comes to marijuana are the illegal grows, because what those do is those foster an environment where other crimes are more likely to occur, like home invasions, like robberies, and robberies going bad and people getting hurt. So my main focus would be on the illegal grows, because luckily we don't have the problem like Yuba County or Butte County does, because we don't have the same landscape that they do, where the illegal grows are out of hand sometimes. But I firmly believe that the illegal grows need to be focused on. They need to be prosecuted, because those are what foster the more serious crimes, and those are what endanger the people of Sutter County the most.
Thanks. Amanda?
There are definitely laws that were passed in California that I consider somewhat unfortunate, and that's one of them. An interesting side note is we really are one community, and there have been a lot of illegal grows that have been investigated by our local narcotics task force, and their staffing is also considerably low. And our DA investigators out of the Sutter County District Attorney's Office have been to almost every one of those illegal grows, providing the necessary staffing to investigate those. So that's just a side note, but I think it's significant. We will continue to prosecute anyone who commits crimes, whether it's a high-level or low-level marijuana violation.
Follow up, Chris.
Marijuana is legal in California now. That's the law, and that's what we have to live with. And I don't know low-level offenders. I mean, basically everything's a misdemeanor now, and if they're guilty, they should be prosecuted. But I think the focus really should be on the dangerous situations that the big illegal grows foster.
Thank you.
Amanda, California recently enacted SB 54, the so-called sanctuary state law. In your view, is this law constitutional? How do you see it affecting your ability to enforce the law in Sutter County as the district attorney?
Well, as a district attorney, again, I don't agree with every law that gets passed, but I've taken an oath to uphold the laws, and that is my job. Unfortunately, in this situation where there's a dichotomy between the federal and the state laws, there's briefs being filed, and it's going through the process and working its way through. So hopefully we'll see how that falls out quickly. I definitely support the efforts to appeal the sanctuary state laws. I have some major concerns for public safety, and that's our goal, is public safety in the district attorney's office.
Chris?
I think, obviously, I'm not even qualified to start commenting on the constitutionality of the sanctuary states. It is in the courts, and it will be decided. But the one thing I'd like to say is that a lot of people like to just say, well, I'm firmly against sanctuary cities or states, or I'm totally opposed to that law. So I understand that, and I respect that. That's fine. But if I were DA, I know that there's exceptions to these rules, and I would want to make sure every law enforcement officer in Sutter County has a list of the exceptions, because there are exceptions where they can contact ICE. There are ways to go around the law, my understanding. I think that needs to be looked into, but to just say I'm against it doesn't really do any good. It is the law in our state, and we do have to abide by it, at least for now.
Any further comment?
Just that regarding this area of law, or any, the district attorney's office currently goes into all of our local law enforcement agencies for every one of their briefing shifts and does a training. Every month we go over there and we talk about current events, we talk about pending legislature, new legislature, or whatever else is going on that we can do as a way of improving communication and unity with our law enforcement agency. So that's something that we started after I became the district attorney.
Thank you.
Starting with Chris. Which is more important, winning cases or serving justice? I ask because justice doesn't always mean jail. It could be treatment or leniency. What does equal justice mean to you?
Equal justice means what's right. Sometimes it means sending somebody to prison. Sometimes it means sending somebody to rehab. Having done both sides now for quite a bit of time, I definitely understand that. But definitely the goal of a prosecutor is not to just win cases. The goal of the prosecutor is to make sure justice is done. Not everybody is dangerous. Not everybody is a hardened criminal. Not everybody needs to go to prison. There are a lot of people that make simple mistakes, that make mistakes that will never make the same mistake twice. So there are, what justice means is the best outcome for everybody involved. And like I said, sometimes that means somebody needs to go to prison. Sometimes that means somebody doesn't need to go to prison. And that's why I think having one person in charge of a case from start to finish, that person knows the best way to handle the outcome of the case.
Thanks. Amanda?
Thank you. Justice is achieved in a district attorney's office when you have attorneys and investigators who are trained to read each and every case, to establish whether or not the evidence is there to prove guilt, and then to establish whether or not it should be prosecuted, to look at the facts of the case, to look at the history of the individual involved, to be able to gauge the merits of it and determine what the right thing is. Not what is best for anybody, but what the just, equitable, right thing is. And that's the kind of attorneys that we have in the district attorney's office. That's why they handle their cases. That's why they handle calendars. That's why every felony attorney in my office has handled almost every felony case we have, and the same thing for the misdemeanor deputies. They know what they're doing. That's called justice.
Follow-up, Chris?
Yeah, I totally disagree that their attorneys know exactly what they're doing. The people that go to court for the DA's office in Sutter County read a small synopsis of what the case is about. They don't read the whole report. They don't read everything that the cop wrote. They don't read everything that everybody said. I know this because I've been going to court from the opposite side for 7 years, and I know this because I was a prosecutor in Sutter County when it was and is a horizontal system. The system dates back decades. There's no reason for it. It needs to change.
Amanda, employee morale and retention are critical to a successful department. What steps would you take to maintain or improve morale and retention in the district attorney's office?
The morale of my office is probably the thing I am most proud of. My office is united. My office has a great morale. My office meets together. The Assistant District Attorney, Gianna McClung. They can go to the Chief Deputy, John Duffy, both of whom are here tonight. Anyone can go and report to their supervisor or to me, and that has been done consistently, not only to address issues, but more importantly, to make suggestions to better our office. We've implemented suggestions that have come from employees of every different background and career. We are an office with a great morale who's unified around common goals and visions and respect for each other.
Chris?
Well, my opponent just mentioned the fact that they talk about cases together and brainstorm cases. Well, somebody needed to brainstorm the case for Sal Martinez, who was prosecuted by my opponent for assault with a firearm and was acquitted by a jury of his peers in about an hour and a half. This is the kind of inexperience that I've seen come out of the DA's office. It cost this man who's here tonight 18 months of his life. He lost his job, he was prosecuted, he was looking at prison when he was a sworn peace officer, pulled his gun during what he believed could be a felony hit and run and told the person, stop, don't leave, I called the police. And my opponent decided to prosecute that individual after staffing the case apparently with her other co-workers and deciding to prosecute him. It was wrong, he was acquitted, he got his job back. That's the problem. Those are the problems that I see coming out of the DA's office, a lack of experience and a lack of knowledge and a lack of deciding which cases should be prosecuted and which ones shouldn't.
Amanda, any follow-up?
Yes. Nobody should be treated differently, whether they're a police officer or any other career field. And when somebody is involved in a regular minor traffic accident and runs towards the person who is still sitting in their car on the side of the road and pulls a gun on them and puts a gun in their face in plain clothes and does not identify themselves as a police officer, that is called assault. And we will prosecute people for committing crimes. Now, the great thing about our criminal justice system is it's up to a jury. Now, absolutely, we staff that case with our attorneys, our investigators. We would do it again, and we would let the jury decide. That's what happened here.
And the jury decided. And you
Thank
still
you. Steve?
This question starts with Chris Scarlett. Since before Amanda Hopper's term began, the Sutter County DA's office seems to have been involved in one scandal or another. How does that affect the performance of the department, and how does the DA lead the department away from all that?
That would definitely be at the top of my list as far as goals go. To keep the DA's office off the front page of the Appeal Democrat, to keep the scandals out of the office. I think for the past 3.5 years, the change hasn't happened, and the turmoil that was caused by Carl Adams is second to none. But it hasn't stopped. It's still prevalent in the DA's office, and I think it's one of the things that really needs to change. That's why I'm here. That's why I think the DA's office needs a new direction. That's why I think we need a change at the DA's office.
Amanda?
Part of leadership is making the difficult decisions that you know are going to put a target on your back and doing it anyway because it's the right thing to do, and standing by those right decisions despite the lies, despite the rumors that come from disgruntled former employees and people who have been proven to have credibility issues, who say things without facts, without foundation, without proof, and do so for their own vitriolic and vicious agendas.
Follow up, Chris.
Just that I was accused recently with no facts at all of doing something, and I think that's wrong. And I think that we need a new direction. We need to stop the turmoil. We need to stop the problems. The problems are obvious, and they haven't stopped. I was honestly hoping that they would stop when Amanda took office. I supported Amanda, and it hasn't happened. That's why I'm here.
Okay, Amanda. Next question is for you. As the head of the district attorney's office, do you have the authority to hire and fire employees in your office, or does the board of supervisors control that authority?
I have the authority to hire and fire employees. However, with government employment, unlike in the private sector, there are many, many steps that must be taken. There are hoops that have to be jumped through. There is an incredibly complex process for terminating employees particularly. And when somebody actually is fired, it's a pretty strong indicator that it's with merit when you're talking about a government employee, especially when you're looking at county government where it doesn't happen without strong justification.
Chris?
Obviously, hiring and firing is ultimately the decision of the DA or the supervisor in charge of that person. But and I think there's been some bad decisions made by Amanda as far as hiring and firing, and it's one of the things that has made me decide to run for DA. It goes back to the turmoil, the scandals, and the newspaper and the stories. And I think there's two sides to every story, and I wouldn't say that people are just making things up, and I wouldn't say that people are just trying to make statements that aren't true, because obviously there are two sides to every story when it comes to hiring and firing. But the Board of Supervisors is nothing except an appellate process, and I think hiring good people obviously is key, and I think there are some good people at the DA's office. I've never said there weren't. I've never said that people at the DA's office aren't happy. I've said that I think there's problems there caused from the top.
Amanda, any follow-up?
Just that the statements have been repeatedly made about the turmoil in my office and the low morale in my office. Those are statements made outside of the office. Again, I would encourage you to speak to anyone in my office if you want to know what's really going on there, what the morale is like, and what the amazing work is that the people there do.
Steve?
Starting with Chris, please outline how you plan to continue and grow the office's relationship with sheriffs and police departments in Sutter and Yuba counties.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to give every law enforcement officer in Sutter County my cell phone number. I'm going to tell them, call whenever you want, 24/7. If I don't answer, I will call you back as soon as I can. But I want to be there for the law enforcement officers. I want to make sure the cases that come to the DA's office are the best possible, the best situation, the best investigation. That way they don't come to the DA's office with requests for the officers to go and do more work on the case. If an officer, a new officer, is out on the scene, has a question, somebody doesn't know the answer while he's standing there, call me up. I don't have a problem. I do not have a problem with that. That's the way I've always been as a prosecutor. Please, let's communicate. Please, let's do a good job together. It'll make everybody's life easier in the long run when a case is thoroughly investigated. And when it comes to the DA's office, it will be done, it will be ready, and it will be prosecuted properly.
Thanks. Amanda?
Thank you. Our law enforcement officers have my phone number, but more importantly, they have the phone numbers of Ms. McClung, Mr. King, Mr. McBride, Mr. Serafin, and every other attorney in my office. They also have the phone numbers of the investigators in my office. We have a call-out list that we regularly update and send out to them so that they have access to us 24/7, and we have dedicated people who are told that they're available 24/7 to law enforcement. We've also made many steps to improve communication with them, the first being the briefing trainings that I referenced earlier. We're going to an e-subpoena program probably in about 3 weeks, which improves the lifetime communication with our law enforcement officers when they need to come to court. We've also implemented a new policy when law enforcement officers are victims of crime. We've done everything that we can to make sure that there's improved communication with them. And so I think that we'll continue to do that, but we've already implemented improved communication steps.
Thanks. Chris, follow up?
That's funny because one of the biggest complaints I hear I've heard and hear during this campaign is that law enforcement cannot reach anybody at the DA's office. They cannot get a phone call back, and they have a really low communication with people at the DA's office. So, in fact, the very first request I had for a lawn sign when I started this whole thing was from a law enforcement officer here in Sutter County. So I disagree that there is good communication currently between the DA's office and law enforcement.
Amanda, last November we lost 2 young men in our community to a drunk driver in Butte County. Similar crimes happen in Yuba and Sutter counties. What do you think of our current laws regarding drunk driving?
I think that there are laws that appropriately handle certain drug driving offenses. The one where Mason Owens and Jensen lost their lives was completely insufficient. Those 2 young men were, sorry, I knew them. That case was a tragedy, as many cases are, but the outcome was also, I believe, insufficient. The laws for drunk driving need to be such that the deterrent factor stops people from getting behind the wheel of a vehicle under the influence of any alcoholic beverage at any time. And the way that the laws are today, the people who know the laws take that risk every single day, and that is unacceptable.
Chris?
I'm not familiar with that person, the responsible person. I'm not familiar with that person's history, but what I can say is in certain situations, the DUI laws can be a little bit too lenient when it comes to people dying in certain situations. There's no question about it. I know that if somebody has a prior DUI and they get into an accident and somebody gets killed, they can be prosecuted for murder and they can be sent to prison for the rest of their life. The problem comes when somebody doesn't have a history of driving under the influence. They go out, they drive under the influence, and somebody dies. The punishment can definitely be seen and definitely at times be not sufficient. And it's been that way for quite a while. I don't know of anybody actually trying to change it, but I do know that there's definitely been a wave of people being prosecuted for murder when they have had a prior DUI at some point.
Amanda, any follow-up?
The individual in that specific case had a prior DUI and was not prosecuted for murder, is my understanding. But the difference between a DUI where someone dies and a DUI where nobody dies shouldn't be considered in our legislature as far as the severity of the offense. I do think the sentencing needs to be considered, but the only difference is luck, the grace of God. Somebody still got behind the vehicle, the wheel of a vehicle, under the influence.
Okay, and 15th and final question. The candidates have been really great at moving things along, and so we've gotten a few extra questions in. Steve, you have the final question.
Sure. Starting with Chris. Can a district attorney play a role in moving a county ahead? What are your plans to help Sutter County move forward?
Yes, that absolutely, definitely, they can play a big role. The very first thing I would do is I would be a working DA. I would go to court, I would handle cases, I would do jury trials. I would let the people of Sutter County see their DA in court working for them, prosecuting criminals. I would stick to the very hard cases, the very serious cases, the murder cases, the gang cases. Absolutely. I want to establish a quality of life division at the DA's office. I want to, I've heard a lot of the sheriff candidates talk about this. I would love to have a multi-agency division where we can all take part in making the life in Sutter County better. Focusing on ag crimes, focusing on elder abuse, focusing on the crimes that aren't necessarily looked at as the more serious cases where people go to prison, but they have very real victims and they have very real impact on Sutter County.
A district attorney can give back and help improve their community by doing things like leading an office of qualified people, thinking outside of the box, leading and instigating proactive investigations, coming up with the ideas for child predator sex stings, for active shooter training, for ways of giving back to the community and bringing that community forward that aren't traditional going to court. I have 10 attorneys who can go to court. I go to court when they need me, but I'm the only one that can come up with ideas that think outside the box and bring this community farther forward than it was before.
Yeah, my question is, when was the last time Amanda did a jury trial? I know she's never tried a murder case, and she just said she's the one that people come to for advice when they have a question. The questions can only get answered by somebody that's been there, somebody that's done it, somebody that's tried the hard cases, somebody that has the knowledge, the understanding, and the experience. And right now we don't have that, and I think that needs to change. I think somebody needs to change the direction of the DA's office.
Okay, it's time now for our closing statements, and our first closing statement is going to be from Chris. Go ahead.
Thank you. As I said, I think we need a new direction for the DA's office. I think we need somebody with experience. I think we need somebody that has done the hard cases, that has the experience, that has the knowledge to mentor a lot of the new DAs that are there. Somebody that will go to court, somebody that will watch them, somebody that will mentor them, somebody that will make a difference, somebody that will move the office forward. I'm the only candidate with the murder trial experience, and why is that important? Because as my opponent just said, she's the person that people go to with questions. She's the ultimate decision maker. She's the one that when somebody gets killed in this county, she's the one that makes the decision. So my question to you is, would you want me, somebody that has sent numerous people to prison for the rest of their natural life because they have killed somebody in this community, would you want me to prosecute the murder of one of your loved ones, or would you want my opponent, somebody who's never been there, somebody who's never done it? She's never done a trial since she became DA. I will do the trials. I will do what's best for Sutter County.
Amanda, your closing comments?
Thank you. I came into this job as the district attorney thinking that I was going to be able to do so many things, and I've accomplished many great things that I'm very proud of, but a lot of the things that I was hopeful to do, I learned that there was a lot of administrative requirements, things like fighting for good people, giving them the opportunity to serve and to do the work that only they can do. But more importantly, I know that there are some district attorneys across the state who like to handle the more high-profile cases, to keep their name out there, to get the credit, but I don't do that. I have great people. I put my faith and my trust in those people. I've handled murder cases. I've sent people to prison for murder, but none of them have gone to trial. I've even dismissed murder cases because it was in the interest of justice. I've made hard decisions, but I also make the consistent decision to be a team unit, to trust them, to be proud of the work that they do, proud of the work that we do as a district attorney's office. 4 years ago, I promised you guys, like I said, a change in the culture of the district attorney's office. I've kept that promise. We're united, despite all of the lies and the public attacks. I also promised that we would do justice. I've kept that promise too. I will continue to keep that promise. You have a district attorney's office that is committed to prosecuting criminals with integrity, with dedication, and to serving justice. That will not change.
Well, we've heard some really passionate comments tonight, and we want to thank both candidates for joining us. Thank you. We're going to take about a 10-minute break, and we'll resume at about 7:08.
That's what I was going to recommend. Yeah. We're only using 2
Turned it off during the break, so I just like to make sure I give Papa a warning. Yeah, I just turned it off for a while when you were at the break because I didn't want somebody to just be over there just having a conversation and pick it up and yeah.
I thought it was a trophy. Nope.
Night's not over yet.
Right?
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started one more time. Good evening again, and thank you. My name is Dale Lyler with the Governmental Affairs Committee for the Chamber of Commerce. I mentioned before, we've got a team that actually puts this together, and want to thank everybody. Bill Lloyd, Jackie Lee, Amy Carter, Margaret Fernandez for helping make all the calls, get everybody together. This is the last forum for this series, and we'll have another one come, another group of them, September, October timeframe. And again, thank you all for coming out. I know, I hope everybody finds these as informative as I do. And again, I want to thank Bob and Steve for all the work that they put into this. So having said that, one last thing, if you do have questions, again, the questions need to address all three candidates. And we will have folks wandering around. If you do have, I was wandering around a little bit during the last forum. If you have cards or questions, look up. And Bob, do we have more questions again than we have?
Yes, we have.
So
we have quite a few questions already.
Okay, so we do have quite a few, but so that means make them great. All right, thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you, Dale. And this forum, along with all the forums that we've had over the past month for Yuba and Sutter counties, are sponsored by the Appeal Democrat, Yuba Sutter Chamber of Commerce, and being broadcast live on the Appeal Democrat Facebook page. And it'll be online on the Facebook page under the Videos tab until the elections. It's also being broadcast live tonight on its Yuba City and More Facebook page, and that'll be posted through Election Day as well. And you might want to text your friends to let them know to tune in. Also, we've received about 29 questions in advance from the Forum Committee and from the readers of the Appeal Democrat, a number of questions here today. And we'll be asking 10 or 11 questions during this session, so please don't be offended if your question isn't asked. Candidates, we have a timekeeper. Jackie Lee is here today, and she has 3 signs she'll hold up. One of them says 30 seconds, another says 15 seconds, and finally, time's up. We ask you to please adhere closely to these time limits or come in under, and that'll help us get in more questions and provide fairness and whatnot. So here's the time to the first person to answer a question will be rotated with each question asked. And the person answering the question first will have a 30-second opportunity to rebut or to add to their answer. And finally, each candidate will have up to 90 seconds for an opening statement and 2 minutes for a closing statement. There are no rebuttals for the opening and closing statement. And did I already mention the rebuttal? There's a 30-second rebuttal that you can take if you choose to do so. I think I already mentioned that. So with that said, please hold your applause to the end. And we're going to start with our first opening statement from Jeff Pierce.
Well, there we go. I'd like to thank the Chamber and the Appeal Democrat for having this forum. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Jeff Pierce, and I'm running for Sutter County Sheriff. I've been in law enforcement for 40 years, and I'm going my 37th year with the Sutter County Sheriff's Office. I've worked my way up through the chain of command, and for the last 8 years, I've been your under sheriff, serving the second command of the Sheriff's Office. I've worked pretty much every place in the Sheriff's Department. I've worked in jail, courts, patrol, detectives, narcotics. I've been on many special teams, including canine, firearm instructor, field training officer, SWAT team leader, SWAT team commander. I graduated from high school and went on to college and obtained my associate arts degree in administrative justice at Yuba College and a bachelor of science degree in criminal justice from Sacramento State. I've attended and graduated from the National FBI Academy. I have multiple police officer standard certificates, which includes a management certificate. I have a lot of experience through my career. I've been very involved in upgrading the technologies and programs, and done a lot of work in putting different type of programs together. I have 3 sons and 5 grandsons, and I've been farming for the last 30 years in South Sutter County.
Dennis Hauck, your opening statement.
Good evening, I'm Dennis Hauck, and I'm running for Sutter County Sheriff, and I appreciate everybody coming out to listen to us this evening. I started my law enforcement career 25 years ago with Yuba County Sheriff's Office, and I worked for 2 years in the jail at Yuba County Sheriff's Office. In 1994, I went to work for Marysville Police Department, and during my 14 years at Marysville PD, I rose to the rank of sergeant. And there were times during my career where Marysville was without a chief of police, and I always stepped up to help with the administrative functions of the department during those time periods. I also was one of the founding officers at Marysville Police Department for the community policing program, which was really, really effective in combating crime and building relationships with the people and with local businesses. And I also helped manage part of the $7.5 million budget and secured over $1 million worth of grant funding. In 2007, I went to work for Yuba City Police Department, where I again rose to the rank of sergeant, which I currently serve as for the citizens of Yuba City. I look forward to earning your vote on June 5th. Thank you very much.
And Brandon Barnes, your opening statement.
Yeah, thank you. And greetings to everyone. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce as well as the Appeal Democrat for hosting our forum tonight. Also, thanks to everyone here in attendance. Greatly appreciated. I'm Captain Brandon Barnes, and I'm a candidate for Sutter County Sheriff. I'm currently employed at the Yuba County Sheriff, where I've worked for more than 22 years, and I have professional experience in all aspects of running the Sheriff's Department. While I may make my living across the river, I'm a longtime Sutter County resident, and I live in Live Oak with my wife Jennifer and 3 of our 4 children. So Sutter County is our home, and it's because of our home that we feel a sense of obligation to try to work to make our community better. And this is why I've decided to run for sheriff. I began my career in corrections, but soon after I was promoted to patrol deputy. Within 4 years of that assignment, I was promoted to the rank of patrol sergeant, where I served as the patrol operations supervisor, as well as the supervisor of our community policing unit. I've worked detective assignments both as a sergeant and on 2 separate occasions as chief of detectives when I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. During my time in detectives, I worked some of the most complex cases, and I've also served as a coordinator of the Yuba Sutter anti-gang enforcement team. It was during that time that I got to see firsthand the challenges our communities face. I've also served on the SWAT team, and and for 7 years I was the SWAT commander, and I worked some of the most critical incidents that we had in Yuba County. As sheriff, I'll bring the department back to a true community policing-based model. I have a Barnes plan of action, which I'll have available for you here tonight, and I look forward to discussing that plan with you and answering any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and we'll start our questioning with Jeff Pierce, and Steve, you have the first question.
What's your assessment of how emergency services worked during last year's Oroville Dam crisis? What could your office do to make things work better? For example, how could we achieve better coordinated evacuations?
This particular incident was one of those incidences that occurred immediately. We had no forewarning whatsoever, and in fact, a lot of times we found it over social media. At the time, we were already preparing for a slow rise flood plan, so we were somewhat prepared. And at the time this emergency came down, we started to take everything down, and all of a sudden the Facebook came live and started giving out warnings. We got calls, and we responded best that we could. What we did learn in this is that communications is a key, and being on the same page with all the entities and what we do. Also, trying to understand that this is the biggest evacuation pretty much in the United States. We had 180 people that were evacuated with no notice, and that was a challenge in itself. And it was a learning experience, and I think we're better prepared for the next round. But the bottom line is, it's like putting water in a funnel. You can get so much water through the funnel and evacuating people.
Dennis?
So my assessment of that situation was that it should have been planned for years in advance. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. We need to do that constantly. It was preventable in that it was predictable. We live downstream from a huge earth-filled dam. And building bridges and relationships with, not only within the community, but with state level employees would have came into play with that. I have a very good relationship with Scott Silsby with the California Highway Patrol. One of the first things I would have done is made Highway 99 southbound all lanes and flow all traffic out of Sutter County.
Thanks. Brendan?
Yeah, thank you. Clearly, I believe as a community, we got exposed from a public safety standpoint. There's a saying that chance favors the prepared mind, and we need to do a much better job of preparing here at the local level. I would disagree with opening all 4 lanes southbound to Sacramento for a couple reasons. In an emergency like that, you cannot close all the northbound traffic and all the off-ramps. You certainly don't have the manpower to do that. Additionally, you have to leave a lane open for public safety response, both directions. So I don't know that that would be effective. And it would cause the same problem in Sacramento when you got there. So we need to get together and we need to work in unison with the Highway Patrol, operations of emergency services, and we need to look at realistic plans that make sense and will save lives.
Jeff, would you like to follow up?
We did consider shutting down the highways. We talked to the CHP officers, and as the conclusion was is that if we shut down going only one way, we would be unable to get our resources in, as well as people who have loved ones that need to evacuate the loved ones. And if we evacuate down, say, Highway 20, it would just back up all the way back to Yuba City, and you'd still be in the same problem.
Okay, Dennis, your question. What are the top 3 priorities for the Sheriff's Department? If successful in the election, what are your plans and priorities, short-term and long-term?
A lot for 1 minute to answer. So number 1 would be to establish a citizen advisory panel. I want to hear from the public what the public thinks the Sheriff's Department is doing right, what we're doing wrong, and what can be done differently. Number 2 would be to address the morale issues within the Sheriff's Office and try to create a Sheriff's Office that everybody in this room can look at and be proud of. Number 3 would be to put in the training for the sheriff's deputies and make sure they get equipment necessary to do their job easier and better to make Sutter County residents safer.
Okay. Brendan?
Yeah, thank you. It's no secret, we've talked about it publicly in other forums, that the officers at the Sheriff's Department need to have a pay increase to at least be consistent with local prevailing wages. And so stabilizing the workforce, that's going to be one of my priorities. Also conducting an internal audit to find out where we have deficiencies and where we can make improvements within the internal workings of the Sheriff's Department. And then lastly is to implement my plan of action, which is a community-based model. Chief among those is developing a community response team, which will be made up of both sworn and non-sworn personnel. It was mentioned in the previous forum. I would like to extend that invitation to other departments within the county so that we have a team that can respond to day-to-day issues in our community, whether it's a homeless situation, a school safety issue. We'll have the flexibility to respond. And so those 3 issues will be what I'll be focused on when I take office.
Jeff?
I'd like to give more rural area patrol, which is increased staffing, and currently on that issue, we are asking in our budget this year to fund 2 community service officers, which are non-sworn positions. These positions that allow the officers to free up from cold calls such as burglaries, thefts, things that have no suspect or not in progress, to go out and be proactive and get out in the community a little bit more. I'd like to harden up the schools and make the schools safer. I would like to also continue in working in trying to resolve the homeless problems, and which we are working every day on and trying to find solutions. And we're in the midst of getting those solutions together so we can try to solve the problem.
Dennis, any follow-up?
The follow-up to that would be that as part of my community policing model, putting in play a program that I call Rural Shield to provide better patrol for rural Sutter County residents.
Thank you.
Starting with Brandon.
Yes, sir.
Two-parter.
Okay.
What new ideas do you bring to the table to help the agricultural industry deal with farm equipment theft and crop theft in the region? Secondly, sometimes funding hinders outreach programs. So is there something the office can team up with, somebody the office can team up with that like local agriculture groups to get funding for more rural work?
So when you say the office, you mean the sheriff's office or the farm bureau?
The sheriff's office.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think, part of, what I just mentioned, my community response team will have a big impact on being able to go out and work details in our agricultural areas. In the past, I've been involved with the Farm Bureau and I've attended their meetings, and we've looked at things like owner applied numbers and things like that. And those are great at helping recover and identify property, but we need to be more proactive on the front end. So we need to increase our community patrols out there through citizen patrols, also increase our reserve patrols out there, and make sure that we have open lines of communication with those out in our agricultural areas. Some of the ideas to, foster communication. Obviously, there's always grant opportunities you can look for. I know that in the past we've used tracking devices to help be proactive, and that seems to have been effective. And so just having open dialogue and being engaged with the farm community and the Farm Bureau, I think, will go a long way to helping resolve those problems.
Thanks. Jeff?
I'd like to increase the rural area patrol for the farming community. We have been actively working with the farmers throughout the county. I started the rural area aero patrol of the rural areas during the farming season and harvest seasons. In addition, we've put together a equipment identification program and a preventive farm program. We also have partnership with the Farm Bureau, and we've also been supplied with tracking systems from funding from the Farm Bureau. And we do use those cameras to set out in areas where we have a higher crime, and they've been useful in helping us solve crime. And in addition, I do want to start a rural area volunteer program.
Thanks. Dennis?
I grew up on a dairy farm, and I understand the plight and the needs of local farmers. We need to make sure that our farmers are protected and taken care of, and working with Farm Bureau is vital to that. So part of my plan is using technology to our advantage. There are micro GPS devices that are available through grant funding that we can subsidize through grant money and to the local farmers. There's also micro printing technology to mark farm equipment, as well as I have experience with camera systems to put in high crime areas to monitor those areas and let criminals know that they're being recorded when they go into those areas. And that's been highly effective in the city of Yuba City, that camera program that I run.
Thanks. Follow up, Brandon?
Yeah, just one quick comment. Also one of the things we need to do is we need to place a greater emphasis on our resident deputies, the ones that are actually living out in those communities like Nicholas and Robbins, so that they have quicker response times. Currently, the only South County deputy that was patrolling down there was reassigned to school safety, which is important, but there was no succession plan to backfill him. So we need to make sure that we're being very smart about the decisions that we make.
Next question's for Jeff. We'll start with Jeff. What is your stance on right to carry? Always? Sometimes? Examples, please. Under what scenarios might you deny the right to carry?
I'm a firm believer in our constitutional Second Amendment. I believe that all those who want to carry a concealed weapon should be able to afford the opportunity to carry a concealed weapon. Through the Sheriff's Department, we've made it very easy and very convenient for people that want to get a concealed weapons permit to come in and get one. We only require self-protection, nothing more. You don't need anything more than that. We make our process very easy. We help our people through it. And in fact, we refuse to raise our county fees, but we can't control the state fees. We also got backlog in processing concealed weapons permit, and I did have our command staff, including myself, stay over during nights for approximately 2 weeks and catching up those permits.
Dennis.
I also am a big supporter of the Second Amendment. I think everybody up here is. And as Jeff stated, I agree with self-protection is enough to issue a concealed weapon permit, in my opinion. And as Sheriff of Sutter County, as long as people don't fall under two different categories, that they have mental health deficiencies or criminal problems and can't pass a Department of Justice background check, I will issue a concealed weapon permit to those individuals with the desire and the training.
Brandon.
Yeah, thank you. As Dennis alluded to, we're all big supporters of the Second Amendment and carrying concealed. I also say that self-protection is a good enough reason to carry concealed. As a peace officer, that's why I carry concealed, and I wouldn't hold you to a higher standard than that. That doesn't make a lot of sense. The Appeal Democrat actually did run an article where they shared some statistics, and I believe it was like 2,260 CCW carriers in Sutter County. I did a little quick math based on the population and found that was about 2.3% of the population. I thought that was a little low, actually, and so where I advocate, carry, and I also advocate training, and so one of the things I'll do is I will invite our CCW carriers out to the range periodically, and we will have range day with the sheriff. It'll give us a chance to shoot, train, and then also talk about problems that are facing our community. So you will actually get some face-to-face time with your sheriff.
Jeff, any follow-up?
Just to state that those who are unable to pass a background are not getting a CCW, or if they should get in trouble, then they lose their privilege to have a CCW, such as getting arrested.
Thank you.
Starting with Dennis, here's a question from the survey. What's your opinion of the Keyhole annexation plan and the change that it would bring in patrolling that area and South Yuba City? Would it mean the loss of deputy positions? How would it affect overall operations?
So my opinion of the Keyhole area is that I don't live in that area and I don't get to vote in that area. So it's going to be up to the voters that live in that area whether or not they want to be annexed into the city. Should that go through, that with the master tax exchange plan, that will immediately force the patrol of the Happy Park area that was annexed by the city over 18 years ago, which will free up deputies from those two areas to patrol rural Sutter County more than what they are now. There are a lot of calls for service that occur in the Keyhole area and the Happy Park area.
Thanks. Brandon?
Yeah, it is up to the voters, but I've been on record as saying I don't support that. I don't know that there's been enough of the information provided to determine what impact that's going to have to the general fund. And as sheriff, I feel I can provide quality services to those areas. We talked about the fact that our officers need a raise. Our correctional officers are 8% behind the average for local area. Our patrol officers are, about 17% behind. A starting officer here in this jurisdiction makes $800 less than a Yuba County starting deputy. We need to fix that, and I don't see that happening if we're losing tax dollars out of our general fund. And so, until there's more information on that, I would say that I'm not in support of that.
Thanks. Jeff?
I am neutral, and I think the voters should decide which way they want to go on that. I know that when I walk a Keyhole, one of the biggest questions I have is when it's going to happen and how much it's going to cost. Are we going to lose service? I tell people that it's totally up to them how they want to vote. If they choose to annex in, then fine. If they choose not to, we will continue to do the service and do the best service that we have been in the past. It is, right now with the master tax exchange, we are going to lose roughly $1.5 million to have a hole in our budget if they do annexed in. That not only affects the sheriff's office, that affects the DA's office, the probation department, health department, all these other providers that provide services to our residences. So it is a hit. And if annexation goes through, there's no guarantee that we can even fund additional deputies for the rural area, but we're going to be asking.
Would you like to follow up, Dennis?
Yes, so the area there, the sheriff's office does have adequate deputies on patrol to patrol that area now. The people that suffer are the people that live in the rural county areas that are paying the same tax money as people that live in that area, but receiving reduced services in the because of the response times that it takes for them to get to Meridian or Rioso or Nicholas.
Okay, our next question will start with Brandon. Yuba County Sheriff Durfer recently announced an alternative reporting system online for less serious crimes and situations. It's a way of stretching a budget. How would that work in Sutter County?
Yeah, regretfully, I think that was done out of necessity. Sheriff Durfer has always taken the stance that if you call, you will get a deputy. But because of some of the fiscal challenges over the last 8 years during the recession, they've been forced into that situation. I would take the same position that as long as I can reasonably provide services, if you call the sheriff's department, somebody's going to respond. That's part of community-based policing, is that you have somebody who comes, meets with you, discusses your problem, and works together with you to find reasonable solutions. So I would certainly not advocate doing that. If it was a situation where we were forced to do that because of financial constraints, I would certainly bring that to the community and have town hall meetings and have healthy discussions about reasonable alternatives and let the people be part of the decision-making process.
Jeff?
We have looked into the online reporting system before, and basically for those who are out of the county and who just prefer not to have contact with the sheriff's office and just out of convenience want to report a crime. But our philosophy is that we want to give the service. It is a community service, make sure everybody's getting taken care of. We'll do everything we can to get there. Depending on the number of calls we have and priorities we have, may take a little bit of time, but you're going to get a live body on the phone when you call, not a phone tree, and you're going to get a live deputy down there to talk to you.
Dennis?
So I agree and disagree with both my opponents on some of the aspects. I believe in no call too small, regardless of what the call for service is. If somebody needs to call the sheriff's office, they did that out of for a reason. Calling the sheriff's office isn't something that's done lightly. But I believe that you, the public, need to have alternatives. And so to make a broader choice for you, if you don't want to wait half an hour for a deputy or sometimes an hour for a deputy to respond for a petty theft, I think that as an alternative, not as a necessity, should be available to the public.
Brandon, any follow-up?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Starting with Jeff. Is the sheriff's office up to date on advanced investigations techniques, i.e. computer forensic investigations, with such a limited budget?
We are a member of the Sacramento High-Tech Crime Task Force, and we do have the high-tech forensic computers. One of our challenges is finding somebody who can have the expertise and learn how to do those type of crimes. And it's very hard to find somebody who can fill those shoes. And right now we're handling everything that we can. If we have any type of issues, since we're a member of the Sacramento High-Tech Crime, we often go to them for assistance to help us.
Part of being the sheriff is being able to network with other agencies, and my relationship, having worked at Yuba City for the past decade, I already have that bridge built. Yuba City Police Department is also a member of the High-Tech Crime Unit. The difference is that there are 2 investigators in-house that have that expertise in investigating high-tech crimes and mirroring hard drives, downloading laptops, cell phones, etc. So as sheriff, my intent is to develop a investigations task force working closely with Yuba City Police Department, where we can take on some of the things that they can't handle, and they can assist us with things that we can't handle.
Yeah, so speaking specifically to some of the issues with the high-tech task force, I'm familiar with it. We've used it in the past. I will tell you that your response from them sometimes can be upwards of 3 to 6 months. It's not very efficient when you're trying to solve community problems at a local level. I can also use resources from another agency, but I will tell you that almost everything we do now is captured on a cell phone, somebody's surveillance camera that they have on their house. technology is used to solve a lot of crimes right now. And so putting that burden on another department, it only creates a bigger delay. You have to train people internally, and you have to have, as Jeff said, they have the resources and they have the computers internally. It doesn't sound like they have somebody trained on them. That goes back to the wages. We need to make sure that we stabilize our workforce and that people want to work here, and then provide them the training so that we can do those things internally and get a quicker turnaround and solve crimes quicker.
Follow up, Jeff.
I don't have a follow-up.
Thanks.
Okay, our next question is going to start with Dennis. How hands-on can the sheriff be in the department? How much does the sheriff get away from the desk? And how much interaction should the sheriff have with even the rank and file personnel?
I believe that the sheriff should be very interactive with the rank and file, and take this in reverse order. And as the Sutter County Sheriff, I think it's important for the sheriff to know the job of everyone that works for the position of sheriff. My intention, once sworn into office, is to go and work in the Sutter County Jail and learn what the men and women need in the jail to make that a safer environment for them. Also to interact with the civil division, with the detective unit, to be out with the patrol deputies and out in the public, and to be accessible to everyone.
Brendan.
Yeah, I think interaction with all of your staff is essential. Everybody from the new hire all the way up to your management team, you have to be interacting with them on a daily basis. As a jail commander, today I was in my jail facility no less than 6 times, handling issues, stopping in just to check on my staff, see how they're doing. I think that's not only good leadership, it's just good management. And so that's an essential part of it. I think, quite frankly, that's something that's lacking and missing right now in our current sheriff's department here in Sutter County. I mean, you hear stories about people being at work for 2 hours a day, or handling other business on county time, and that doesn't set a good example for the line staff. And there should be higher expectations, and we should lead by example.
Jeff?
As a sheriff, I feel he should be available to the people. I'm the type of person who goes out and visits the people, visits the farmers, see what's going on. I might have an open door policy to all my line staff. They call me anytime, whenever they want. They can stop by, chat with me. I've been on patrol, riding with them. I've walked to the jails. I've been walking to the courts. I believe a sheriff should be accessible and be able to find what the needs are for his office.
Anything additional, Dennis?
I have nothing additional.
Okay, thank you.
Starting with Brandon, a question from the audience. How are you going to protect our police officers from these terrible criminals shooting them? Seems dangerous for them to even stop a speeding motorist.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the biggest thing that you can do is education and training. That's where the answer lies. You have to educate your officers, and you have to make sure that they have the knowledge to go out and that they're standing on firm footing when they're making decisions. So that's the first thing. The second thing is training. You have to constantly train so that even the most common of circumstances, you don't get complacent, and that you're always prepared to respond to some type of a deadly threat situation. The potential that they're trying to maybe change for there to be necessary force as opposed to reasonable force is completely silly to me. It seems to me if something seems reasonable, it seems necessary. It's what is in the mind of the officer at the time that the threat is occurring. And so training and education, that's where it lies.
Thanks, Jeff.
Brandon hit the nail right. Hit the nail. It comes down to training, teaching your officers to be safe on how to deal with people, how to look for different signs that might be dangerous to you or put yourself in officer safety risk. Understanding that every situation is a different situation. You never know what you're going to go up against. It doesn't help when our legislators make our jobs a little bit tougher. Like Brandon said, necessary force, that's something that we don't want to go down that road. Because if you think about it, if somebody's going to take your life or take your life and you have a reasonable belief they're going to take your life, you need to take their life. I'm sorry, you don't have time to decide what tools that you want to use else.
So being happy at work, is important. And what I mean by that is creating an environment where morale is high. When people come to work, they're not going to be complacent when they're out doing their job. And complacency is what gets officers and deputies killed. When they make a traffic stop, there's no such thing as a routine traffic stop. Nothing we do in law enforcement is routine. Every contact is high risk. And the deputies need to be on high alert whenever they are making contact. What I always tell the men and women that work for me is be suspect of everyone, but don't treat everyone like a suspect. We have to be nice to people, but we also have to be on high alert at all times.
Follow up, Brandon.
Yeah, it's a little offline, but just a general comment. We actually have training simulators in our area. Marysville has access to one that was bought through a grant. We all have access to that. Shooter's Paradise has one. I would just say to our board members and our city council members, I would encourage you guys to try to participate in some type of training simulation just to get a feel for what it's like to be an officer. And I would extend that offer to the community as well, just so that everybody understands what the decision-making process is.
Okay, our next question starts with Jeff. Are you willing to increase deputy training to better ready cases for the DA's office for better outcomes in the prosecution of crimes, or is increased training needed?
I think it's fair to say that our deputies receive more training hours than any of my opponents' agencies. We work very hard to send our deputies to every type of training that we could possibly send them to make them better investigators, better deputies, be safer out there. Training is the key. You have to have the training, and having trained deputies makes the liability go down because they understand what the laws are and they're not making as many mistakes. And we are working hard with the district attorney's office. They do come and they do give us any type of training that we need, from report writing on how to handle certain type of evidence and things like that.
Dennis?
Training is essential in all aspects of law enforcement, but I think most importantly, once the broad level of training is done, such as standardized field sobriety tests, so that deputies know when they encounter somebody that's driving under the influence, how to administer those tests. I also believe in higher levels of training for those individuals that are interested, because when you receive specialized training, the deputies are going to go out and apply that training more. I'm an instructor for a program called A-RIDE, which is Advanced Roadside Impaired Driver Enforcement, that teaches officers how to identify people under the influence of 7 different drug classifications. And whenever I've taught people in those courses, those people go out and apply that in their job.
Brandon?
Yeah, I would also concur that training is essential, and I would also expand on what was said. I think, when you graduate the police academy, there are certain elements of training that you have to go through. And one of those is actually how you testify in court. Once you leave the academy, there's never any additional training on that. They just expect that you're going to go to court and you're going to kind of learn under fire. And so, I think experiencing that, when you have somebody who has as much experience as we do up here, it's a little more comfortable. But it's much like this forum. You're sitting there, there's a jury, there's an audience, and you're being asked questions, and so it can be a little nerve-wracking. And so I think more training for officers in court preparation, having the appropriate documents, having their evidence present, and then how to respond to questions. I think that's important.
Jeff, any follow-up?
In addition to training, we do what's called roll call training every day on new issues, new laws, and new procedures. We also encourage our deputies to increase their training. For instance, they may want to become a detective, or they might want to be working live and become a traffic officer. We always give our people to the training that they would like to further their career with, and it's part of our career development plan.
Thanks. Starting with Dennis. Please talk to us about school safety, resource officers, prevention of school violence, training.
So school safety obviously is on everybody's mind now. And one of the things in 1992, I responded to Lyndhurst High School, one of the first high-profile school shootings. I hope to never have to go to another one of those in my career. But our local schools, they need to be hardened. They need to be made more difficult to get into. River Valley High School does a really good job of it with the fencing system that they have and closing down the school after the students arrive on campus. But I think also we need to teach our educators how to identify people that have mental health issues. The children that have mental health issues are the common factor in every school shooting that we've had in the United States. And if those people were identified and maybe got help before, a lot of that could have been avoided.
Yes, I also support evaluating our schools and trying to harden them. There's a thing called CEPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. So we can look at some of our schools and we can find ways through fencing and shrubs and things like that where we can make them less accessible. We can also look at some grant opportunities to provide bulletproof glass, electronic door locks, things of that nature. There's also a system out there that we use in Yuba County called Catapult. It's a warning system. You can put out an instant message that everybody gets on their cell phone, and it tells you exactly what's occurring, tells you where it's at, gives you a map of the location, and it even has the ability to log students in or out of class, so you can account for students in a very quick manner. The city of Live Oak uses that, but we need to work to integrate that throughout the county. So I think that's a big part of it. So that would be my attitude towards that.
Hardening schools is one of my top priorities. I really believe that we need to spend more time there because those are our precious resources as our children. It's kind of ironic that you have the politicians throughout the United States that have armed security and everything like that, but they're not for having armed security in our schools. I believe they need to allow people to have concealed weapons permit to be able to show up in school. I think each school board should determine whether or not the teachers that want to carry can carry weapons, or they want to use retired police officers, retired military officers, or just want to support Assembly Bill 2067. And that will provide us a school resource officer with each school. However, the funding is the issue on that bill, and hopefully that can be resolved and we get something done.
Follow-up, Dennis?
So Assembly Bill 2067 that James Gallagher drafted, I think might be an answer to getting security in our schools. And when last I spoke to him, the funding would come from ammunition sales. There would be a portion of ammunition sales that goes towards funding that. Hopefully that works out. Hopefully that goes through.
Brandon, to what extent should law enforcement agencies in Sutter County cooperate with federal immigration enforcement, ICE, as when their efforts are directed to otherwise law-abiding, undocumented members of our community?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously SB 54 is kind of a hot topic. I will tell you that, as sheriff, public safety is going to be my primary concern. I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding. I don't think any of the sheriff's departments are using resources to go out and raid farm labor camps. We just don't have the resources to do that, and quite frankly, there's much more pressing issues, all the issues we've been talking about tonight. So if you have those issues where you have somebody who is, a high-profile gang member who has some serious charges, we're going to have to work to make sure that our community is safe. There's also, I think, a little bit of a misunderstanding that if somebody comes into your jail facility, you cannot report that person to immigration. That is not true. Under certain circumstances, you do have the ability to report that. The difference now is that immigration has to provide a warrant signed by a federal magistrate, where in the past they could just provide a detainer and come pick the person up. That's no longer the case. They have to provide a warrant, which is just like any of us would do if we were trying to catch somebody in a community. We would get a warrant.
Jeff?
It's a responsibility of the Sheriff's Department to communicate with ICE. And unfortunately, the state of California says we can't do it. It's a lot safer dealing with people who are serious and violent offenders in our jail, not on the streets. It causes safety problems with our citizens. ICE goes in there, they've got their safety to worry about. We have our citizens' safety to worry about. The bottom line, ICE is a federal job, and it is also constitutionally stated it's a federal job. I believe the Supremacy Clause will take place, and it will be overturned. I think I would encourage our Board of Supervisors to follow a resolution that we are not going to be one of these sanctuary cities. It's kind of ironic that our state can thumb the nose at the law of the federal government, but they expect us to follow their law in violation of the U.S. Constitution. So maybe we thumb our laws, at least do a resolution, do something to try to get this rectified.
Dennis.
So, and I do agree with both the other candidates. One thing, though, that I would like to add to that is something that they're doing down in Southern California, and that's Orange County posting release dates of their persons that are incarcerated in jail. And that is something that I've already talked to the IT department at Sutter County with my plan of putting that into place. And hopefully that will not only give ICE the ability to look and see when somebody's being released, but it'll also give the general public the ability to see when somebody's being released. So if somebody is a victim of stalking or a victim of a sex crime, that victim will know when that suspect is going to be released from incarceration.
Okay, Brandon, any follow-up?
Yeah, just a quick statement. I mean, I would, ask of our board to consider opting out of the sanctuary state law, and support law enforcement and support our ability to provide public safety to our communities, and not let some of these high-profile gang members come into our communities and terrorize us.
Okay, thank you very much. We have time for one more question. Steve?
Starting with Jeff. It seems there are more officer-involved shootings lately. Is that true, and what could be done to prevent them?
Well, with regards to the Sutter County Sheriff's Office, that's more of a perception than reality. We haven't had that many officer-involved shootings. We've had a few, and it is getting dangerous out there. There are more people who are released off of early parole that are serious and violent offenders, trying to find ways to do their crimes. The officers are at heightened risk, and it's a problem.
Dennis?
I believe there has been an increase in the past decade in officer-involved shootings, but and I would attribute a lot of it to what Jeff said, specifically AB 109, Prop 47, and Prop 57, where we're letting dangerous people stay on our streets instead of incarcerating them in state prison. Anybody that thinks that there is not a gang problem in the Yuba-Sutter area has their head stuck in the sand. Sutter County alone, Yuba City Police Department, at least once a week, we are taking a gun off the street, off of a stolen gun off of a gang member. And for that one that we take, there's probably 20 that we miss. So training is important. That's where I talked about complacency earlier. We need our officers and deputies making sure when they make these contacts that they do it as safely as possible.
Brandon?
Yeah, I also agree. I think there has been a slight increase in the shootings in our area, and it does, it is directly because we are releasing more violent criminals out into our communities, and that has a direct impact on our ability to perform our public safety functions for the community. And so, not only do we need to look at training aspects, but we need to make sure that we are properly identifying and being more proactive in conducting parole, probation searches where we can. And if there are violations, we can get these people off the street so that hopefully we can prevent some of these. The other thing that I will say is that, I think social media impacts that as well, because within seconds of something happening, a media gets blasted out, and sometimes there's misinformation that goes out to the community. And so we want to be able to control that narrative, be transparent, and have open lines of communication, and immediately report to our community what is going on if there's a shooting situation.
Thanks. Additional comment, Jeff?
No, I don't.
Thanks.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Time now for closing statements, and we'll have up to 2 minutes for each of your statements. We'll start with Dennis Hauck.
First off, I would like to thank the Chamber and the Appeal Democrat for hosting this evening, and thank you for all of you in the audience for coming out and listening. And hopefully some of the questions that were asked tonight were submitted by you. If not, please, and you have a question directly of me, please look me up on my website or Facebook. I answer all of my own questions, and I reply to all of my own telephone calls. So I am running for Sutter County Sheriff because you, the citizens of Sutter County, deserve a sheriff's office that you can look at and that you can be proud of. And I think that in my 25 years of local law enforcement experience, that I have developed those types of relationships within departments, within the teams that I've led, that people can look at and be proud of. So what I want to ask you is, do you folks feel safer now than you did 10 years ago? Or what about 5 years ago? So experience, you know, my grandfather used to always say, experience only matters if you've got something to show for it. So again, thank you for coming out this evening, and I appreciate it.
Brandon Barnes.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to thank everyone for being here tonight. This is an important sheriff's race, obviously. It's going to affect public safety well into the future. Our next elected sheriff needs to be experienced, well prepared, and have a plan to provide a higher quality of public safety. I believe that I've demonstrated tonight that I possess all of those attributes. I have endorsements from my department's Reserve Association, our Deputy Sheriff's Association, the Management Association, as well as Under Sheriff Ron Johnson and Sheriff Steve Durford. Having the unanimous respect and support of the men and women that I've worked with throughout my career, I think it speaks to my leadership and my work ethic. I also have endorsements from many active and retired law enforcement professionals, as well as other prominent community members. I want to publicly thank them all tonight for their belief in me. So there are certain duties that are unique to running a sheriff's department. These include rural patrol operations, running a jail, being the chief deputy coroner, running a civil division, search and rescue operations, and providing court and dignitary protection. Because I work at a neighboring sheriff's department, I understand the challenges that come with providing rural services, and I know what it takes to run a sheriff's department. I was the first candidate in this race to present the community with my plan of action, and I have the experience to carry out my vision. I think it's no secret that now more than ever, we need the support and the assistance of our community members. That's why I'm an advocate of a community-based policing model. So if anyone tonight would like to discuss any of the issues that we've talked about in greater detail, you can reach me through my website, or my pamphlets have my phone number listed on them. I hope the voters will take the time to research each candidate, because if they do, I'm confident that I will be the next sheriff of Sutter County. I thank everyone for their time tonight, and come June 5th, I'd be honored if you would vote Brandon Barnes for Sutter County Sheriff.
Thank you, Jeff Pierce.
In a few weeks, the Sutter County voters are going to be electing a new sheriff. And it's very important that we elect a sheriff that has the experience, the education, the knowledge, the toughness, and an integrity. I honestly feel that if you take the resumes and accomplishments and what we've done in our respective agencies, you'll objectively see that I am the most qualified person to be your next sheriff. I am the person who can hit the ground running. I know everything from staffing to budgets. I've put together multiple projects throughout the county. I've been involved in many different type of community organizations, from being on a member of the Farm Bureau Advisory Board of the Salvation Army, California Agriculture Commission, Corners Association. I know this department inside and out. I understand. I built up relations with the people in the sheriff's office, as well as the relationships with different departments throughout the county, and also relationship through Sutter County itself, especially having 30 years of farming in this community. I'm the one that can move the sheriff's office forward. I have endorsement of 4 sheriffs: the current Sheriff Paul Parker and 3 retired sheriffs: Sheriff Jim Denny, Sheriff Art Bramwood, and Sheriff Gary Tendo. In addition, I have Sacramento Sheriff Scott Jones. I have retired Sheriff John McGinnis, and I also have retired CHP Commissioner Maury Hannigan providing me endorsements, along with retired Judge Robert Dano. I would be honored to have your vote on June 5th. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very informative 50 minutes. A round of applause for all that. Thank you to our candidates and to our audience. We appreciate you being here. And again, you can rewatch these videos online on the Appeal Democrat Facebook page.
Thank you, Harry. Hey,